When I was very young, not over 7 or 8 years old, my father told me about a murder that was committed when he was a young man. Happened in a town adjoining the one where we lived in Ohio. Those days, a murderer was hanged outdoors, broad daylight, and everyone was invited to see the act and all the gruesome details that went with it. It was an eager, anxious crowd, each pushing to be in at the moment of death. My father managed to get well in front where he could watch. Well, when he saw the rope adjusted around the man's neck, my father could stand no more. He turned away his head and felt humiliated and ashamed for the rest of his life that he could have had that much of a hand in killing a fellow man. My father and mother were not usual people. They were free thinkers in a valley full of rock-ribbed religionists. The only Democrats among Republicans as far as you could see. The only intellectuals. Would you believe my mother thought women should be allowed to vote? Even said so right out loud as far back as 1840. And I remember this perfectly, even though I was only 5 or 6 at the time. She never protested when my father kept me out till midnight riding with him on a hay wagon. Because buried under the straw were slaves my father was helping escape from south to north, from slavery to freedom along the Underground Railway. My father did just enough work for hire, carpentry, house painting, driving a hearse, so he could buy books. Hebrew, Greek, Latin, law, science, metaphysics, religion. My father loved his books, and he loved us to read books. If I became anything at all, I owe it to my father's patience and his books. And to be perfectly honest about it, to some plain hard work on my part. When I was 9, my father set me to work the hottest summer day I can ever remember, hoeing potatoes. I worked hard for a few hours, and then I ran away from that hard work. I went into the practice of law, and have not done any work since. Why the law? Well, in Kinsman, every 4th of July, when Squire Allen got through reading the Declaration of Independence, which we thought he'd written because he always read it, he introduced some lawyer from the county seat. Spoke in a loud voice and waved his hands and arms a great deal, and all the old farmers clapped and nodded their heads and said, "Mighty smart man, great man." That's why the law, they've been sure made the right choice. The law is a bum profession as generally practiced. It's devoid of idealism, almost poverty-stricken when it comes to any real ideals. But I only learned that when I was in too deep to get out. My trouble was I was fascinated by the idea of the law, the clash of good minds, people I'd meet. It was even better than baseball. Although I remember one afternoon in high school with my girlfriend Jessie watching, came to bat in last of the 9th, us down 1 run, 2 men on, 2 men out, just like Casey at the bat, only I hit one over the grocery store to win the game. Nothing would ever be better than that, not even the monkey trial. I didn't have much of an education. 1 year of college, 1 year of law school in Ann Arbor. Those days, a committee of lawyers examined you for admission to the bar. They were good fellows and tried to help you get through. Today, the Bar Association is about as anxious to encourage competition as the Plumbers Union or the American Medical Association. My first lawyer business was drawing up a contract for a horse trade. For that, I got paid 50 cents by each side. With all that cash jingling in my pockets, I felt so flush and reckless, I asked Jessie to marry me. Guess it made Jessie so reckless, she decided to take a chance. Prettiest girl you ever met, kindest, easiest going, simplest in her taste. She had a lot of small town in her. And so I guess did I, because we were very happy together. We lived 4 years in Ashtabula, Ohio. Horses were being bought and sold at such a rate, we were able to put aside enough money to buy a house. $500 down. But at the last minute, the seller refused to sign over the deed, didn't think we could pay the installments. I got so mad, I said, that's just fine with us. We're planning to move away anyhow. Next day, I met this woman on the street. Never cared much for her. How is our prominent lawyer doing today? She asked me. Fine, fine. I just got a big case. Oh, how nice. Here in Ashtabula. No, in Chicago. Oh, and when do you plan to try the case? Well, as a matter of fact, tomorrow. Next day, I took the early train to Chicago. I had to. If that woman had seen me on the street, she had told everybody in town I was a liar, which I was. So I came to Chicago with straw in my hair and a suit bought and fitted at the Ashtabula Hardware and Emporium. They tell me I've kept that look my entire life. At the Scopes trial, some reporter was giving me a hard time. I told him, I spend as much on my clothes as you do. The only difference is I sleep in mine. Chicago. I got to Chicago at the most shameful moment in that city's history. Just after the people of that city had demanded and been granted death by hanging of 4 men they called anarchists. Of all the men whose side I didn't get to stand by until it was too late, the ones I'm sorriest about are the Haymarket anarchists. It began with the Chicago strike of 1886, when company police shot 7 strikers outside the McCormick plant. Protest meeting was called in Haymarket Square. The meeting was peaceable. Around 10 o'clock, it started to rain. Most of the listeners drifted away. There were only a few hundred left in the square. When Captain Bonfield, acting against the mayor's specific orders not to bring police into Haymarket Square that night, charged into the square in front of 180 uniformed men. We're peaceable, cried the speaker. At that instant, from one of the buildings above the square, some lunatic, to this day no one knows who, threw a dynamite bomb. It landed among the policemen, killed 7 policemen, wounded 60 more, and it killed the socialist movement, the 8-hour day as well. 8 men were taken, editors, lecturers, printers. 8 men accused, not of throwing a bomb, but of writing that, committing the most unpardonable crime of writing that capitalism is the source of all misery, poverty, and crime. And the state of Illinois charged them with conspiring with a man unknown or men unknown, in a place unknown, in a manner unknown to throw the bomb. They introduced evidence manufactured by the police. And during the trial, the judge told the jury that if they found that the articles that these defendants had written had influenced the man to throw the bomb, they were justified in convicting the defendants of murder. 4 of the 8 were hanged. One, Louis Ling, the youngest, killed himself in jail by biting down on a dynamite percussion cap and blowing his head off. 3 were given long sentences, and the people of Chicago pronounced themselves satisfied. Still, Chicago was an extraordinary place. It was life and excitement for me. Good talk, good debates, and good friends like the great John Peter Altgeld, who helped me get my first job with the city as special assessment attorney. I didn't know what it meant either. It meant $60 a week. Worked 4 years for the city of Chicago. Came up against the railroads quite a few times, mostly right-of-way litigation. Generally managed to lick them. So one day the Chicago Northwestern came to me with an offer of a good job as their general attorney. I wasn't sure. My ideas on life didn't equip me for that kind of work, but Altgeld thought I should take it, and I did. Helped us buy a nice house on the north side. I thought it would make Jesse happy. Did. Such a nice day today, Jesse. Did you get outside? It was beautiful down by the lake. Hate to see you cooped up in his house all day long with Paul. You could take him to the park in his carriage. No, of course you don't if you don't want to. It wasn't one-sided, never is. I worked 2 years for the Chicago Northwestern. Then in 1894, Eugene V. Debs pulled out his railway union in support of the Pullman strikers and struck every railroad in the country, including the one I was working for. And I had to choose sides. George Pullman, the sleeping car man, had just built a brand new town on 500 acres of Illinois prairie to house his workers. It was an extraordinary place. Listen to how he described it. Bright beds of flowers and green, velvety stretches of lawn dotted with parks and pretty water vistas. Homes filled with light, a town where all that inspires to cleanliness of person and of thought is generously provided. I almost bought a home there myself. But there's one small thing I couldn't understand. Why anybody living in this paradise, this Garden of Eden, would ever want to go on strike. I thought I'd go down and take a look for myself. The main street was a vision, bright red flower beds, rows of tall green trees lining the walks, houses of neat red brick with trim lawns. It was lovely. But there was one thing that made me curious. One street back of the main street, where the workers lived, houses didn't have lawns. They didn't have windows. They had most one faucet for cold water, and that was set in the basement where it's cheapest to run the pipes in. 3, 4, 5 families crowded into one tenement. And in this entire town where everything that inspires to cleanliness of person is generously provided, not one bathtub. I talked to some of the people who lived there, at least I tried to. They were afraid to talk. Every move they made was being watched. Everything they said was reported back to the company. A man talked about joining a union. He was fired that day and his family thrown out of their home. And his name was put on a blacklist and sent to every railroad in the country. And the wages, 1894 brought hard times. Skilled men who were earning $3.20 a day saw their wages cut so that after Pullman took out his rent money, all they had left to feed their families on was 4 cents a week. But the price of food in the Pullman Company store where their wives had to buy, that stayed the same. 43 men asked permission to come in and tell Mr. Pullman that their families were starving to death. They asked for and received a firm promise that they wouldn't be discharged if they came in to talk. Pullman listened to the 43 men, said, "There's nothing to discuss. My sole duty is to my stockholders, and I see no reason to give the men a gift of money." The next day had them fired, all 43, and put their families out on the street. And that's when the Pullman strike started, and Debs pulled out his union. Of course, it didn't take our government that much time to choose sides. They got one injunction making it a crime for a man to go on strike. Got another injunction making it a crime for a man to suggest to another man that he consider going on strike. But I never thought I'd live to see the day when the United States government called out armed troops against its own unarmed citizens on the streets of Chicago. Look at them, 3,200 of them, guns drawn, bayonets fixed, lined up against the strikers. Look at them. Do you know what day this is? It's the 4th of July, Independence Day. First, angry names, then fists and stones. Until at 3:30 in the afternoon, the strikers charged the troops who were trying to disperse them. The soldiers opened fire as they came. 7 strikers killed. Nobody in the Army was charged. Debs and his entire executive board indicted for conspiracy to commit murder, his own people's murder. And I went into the office of my boss, Mr. Marvin Hewitt, the president of the Chicago Northwestern. Debs has asked me to defend him against you, Mr. Hewitt. And I see no reason except my own selfish interest for turning him down. So I'm going to do it. I don't believe in socialism, but I do believe that government ownership of the railroads is better for the people than railroad ownership of government. Gene Debs. They may have lived someplace, sometime, a kindlier, more gentle soul, but I've never known him. In his jail cell the night before the trial, he said, Go get a good night's sleep, Clarence. Don't worry about me. We'll come out of this all right. If not this time, next time. Gentlemen, if a boy should steal a dime, a small fine would cover the offense. He could not be sent to the penitentiary. But if two boys plot to steal a dime, but do not do it, they both could be sent to the penitentiary as conspirators. Not only could they be, but people are constantly being sent under similar circumstances. This is a historic case which will count much for liberty or against liberty. Conspiracy from the early days of tyranny in England down to the days the railroads use it as a club has been the favorite weapon of every tyrant. It's an effort to punish the crime of thought. If there are still any citizens interested in protecting human liberty, let them study the conspiracy laws of the United States, which have grown so that today no one's liberty is safe. There is a conspiracy in this case, dark and damnable. And I want to say boldly to this court that someone is guilty of the foulest crime disgracing our nation. If my clients are innocent, others are guilty of entering the temple of justice and using the law, which was made to guard, protect, shelter you, me, and these defendants, for the purpose of hounding innocent men to a prison pen. Evil men have conspired to use the law to bring righteous ones to death or to jail. They sentenced Debs to 6 months in the Woodstock jail. He got off easy. No other offense has ever been visited with such severe penalties on those seeking to help the oppressed. After Debs, I didn't think of working for the railroads anymore. Fortunately, labor felt as well disposed towards me as I did towards labor, and for the next 17 years I was to represent them in most of their important cases. I also did criminal and civil law, mostly on the side of the weak, sometimes on the side of the strong, never on the side of the strong against the weak. I was happy in my work. I felt useful. Being a lawyer in Chicago, coming up against malefactors of all types, I can tell you the Illinois legislature was none too good in those days either. I've never seen representatives any different except in a time of some great moral crusade, and then they're always worse. Chicago, we had a number of massage parlors that were used as fronts for houses of prostitution. Got so bad that the word massage came to me. I imagine you know what came to me. And to give someone a massaging, I suspect you know what that meant too. Just to interrupt myself for a minute here. I've always believed that lawyers like to say more than is absolutely necessary. Myself included. Remember one case where this counsel defending a man charged with biting another man's ear off in a fight. There's only one witness. And examining the witness, you mean to say you did not actually see my client bite this other fellow's ear off? No, sir, the witness replied. Counsel could have sat down right then. But he's bound and determined to ask one more. Well, if you didn't see my client bite this other fellow's ear off, how can you be so old-fired sure he did bite his ear off? Well, sir, I saw him spit it out. Anyway, part of this reform movement in Chicago, all the massage parlors were closed up, and thereby preventing a lot of hard-working masseuses from earning a living. They sent an association to me asking me to get an injunction against their being closed down. Did too. I got the ordinance revoked. As I was coming out of court, the state's attorney nudged me and said, Clarence, you certainly gave the state a pretty good massaging on that one. After I went on my own, I didn't have much trouble getting clients. One of the reasons might have been never charged a fee if a man couldn't afford to pay. Lawyer has to do a similar amount of work they cannot hope to be compensated for. And that's the way it should be. All they can hope is that every now and then they'll get a client who can afford to pay. Once this young man came into my office, he asked me to defend him on a charge of robbery. Said he wanted to pay a fee, didn't have any money right then, expected he could raise some by that evening. I told him, better get himself another lawyer. I didn't care to accept any money that had been stolen so recently. The entire country, nobody has it worse off than the Pennsylvania coal miners. Men who work underground, 12-hour shifts, 365 days a year. Men without Thanksgiving or Christmas off. Men whose 10-year-old daughters work in the mills next to the mine, earning 3 cents an hour. President of the Philadelphia and Reading Coal and Iron Company tells us they don't suffer. Why, they can't even speak English. You're a breaker boy, Johnny McCaffrey. That means they set you and 100 others astraddle the chute, and as the coal comes rushing down, you have to pick out the sling. What do you say that takes, Johnny? Quickness. You have to be quick to pick out the sling. Quick, not to lose a finger or hand or arm. Has that ever happened to any of your friends? How many of your friends? Did they feed you, Johnny, before sending you down the breaker? Did they give you anything besides the one potato to take down on your 12-hour shift? Did they let you see the sun all day long? Did they give you one day off all year long? You don't look very old to me. How old are you? When will you be 11? When's your birthday? You might anthracite coal, Mr. Griffith. How's the air down there? Bad? Bad for your lungs? Your eyes? Your headache? Did you ask the company to see a doctor? Does the company have doctors? No. You asked to see a doctor. And they wouldn't. Now, when I asked you about the time you lost your leg, did the company offer to buy you a wooden one? They acknowledged the accident happened in the mines, and still they wouldn't. This demand for a decent life, for an 8-hour day at a decent wage, not a demand to shirk work, as is claimed in this case. Gentlemen of the Commission, there's only one standpoint from which you have the right to approach this question, and that is what will make the best man, the best American citizen, to build up a nation we will be proud of. The laborer who asks for shorter hours is asking for a breath of life, for a chance to develop the best that is in him. It's no excuse to say, well, if you give him shorter hours, he won't use them wisely. Our nation, our civilization, our race is based on the belief that for all his weaknesses, there is still in man that divine spark that will make him reach upward for something higher and better than anything he has ever known. It took the commission over a month to hand down its findings. After we got back to Chicago, I told Jesse, I'd rather see the men get the 8 hours than be elected president of the United States. Now that we finally won in the mines, I had nobody to share it with. For a long time, Jesse and I had been drifting apart. Now, the home and Paul were all we had in common. Could it be different, Jesse, after all these years? We've been taking different roads, We're not at the same place anymore. No, it's not your fault. I may be making a mistake, but I feel I need my freedom. I'm sorry, Jess. Now that I was alone, I found myself working harder than ever at things I cared about. We made a beginning in Pennsylvania, but out west there was open warfare between miners and owners. A man named Harry Orchard, as low a specimen as you'd ever want to see, killed the former governor of Idaho with a bomb, said Big Bill Haywood, the Union man, had put him up to it. Idaho's new governor, Gooding, sent deputies without warrant out to Colorado in the dark of night to kidnap Haywood and rush him back to Boise for hanging. The United States Constitution may have guaranteed Haywood a fair trial. Governor Gooding did guarantee, his exact words, Haywood would never leave Idaho alive. People of Idaho stood up and cheered, all except the miners. I took the side of Haywood. He was a big man. Toughest man I ever met. Totally honest, fearless, incorruptible, strong as an ox inside and out. Terrible temper. And he had one eye, looked just like a pirate. No stranger to violence either. I do not suggest that the working man is always right. He's often wrong, sometimes cruel, and sometimes corrupt. He's often unreasonable and unjust. But to hang Bill Haywood, or any man on the testimony of Harry Orchard, self-confessed perjurer, robbed miners of their ore, killed a drunken man on a dark street, tried to kill the former governor of Colorado. By his own admission, blew up a railroad station, killing 60 men. And this is the man on whose testimony you're being asked to hang Bill Haywood. Gentlemen, sometimes I think I'm dreaming in this case. Sometimes I wonder whether here in Idaho or anywhere else in the country, a man can be put on trial and sane men seriously ask a jury to take the life of a human being based on the testimony of Harry Orchard. What kind of community exists up here that a sane man should ask me? Need I come all the way here from Chicago to defend the honor of your state? There's no way to give Haywood back the 18 months he spent in the Boise jail. If a man is so insane he wants to go out and work for the poor as Haywood has, these are the wages he receives today and has always received since the first foolish man commenced to agitate for the upbuilding of the human race. But gentlemen, it is not alone for Bill Haywood that I speak. I speak for the poor, the weak, the weary, that long line of men who in darkness and despair have borne the labors of the human race. Their eyes are on you 12 men of Idaho tonight. If you kill Haywood, your act will be applauded by many. In the railway offices of our great city, among the spiders of Wall Street, in every bank in the world where men hate Haywood because he fights against the system on which the favored live and grow rich and fat. From all these you will receive blessings and unstinted praise. But if your verdict should be not guilty, there are still those who will reverently bow their heads and thank you, 12 men, for the life and reputation you have saved. Out on our broad prairies where men toil with their hands. Out on the wide oceans where men are tossed and buffeted by the waves. Out in the mills, the factories, and deep down under the earth, thousands of men, women, and children will kneel tonight and ask their God to guide your hearts. As the case was sent to the jury, a sympathetic reporter leaned over to me and said, well, it takes 12. No, I said to him, it takes only one. I knew that here in Boise, best we could hope for was a hung jury. A little after 5 o'clock in the morning, an eavesdropper outside the jury room heard the jury taking a poll. Foreman announced a vote of 11-1. Boise 11-1 meant 11-1 for conviction. Told the newspapers, which had an extra out on the street in 10 minutes. Boise rose up in joy. All the women came out in their finest jewelry, the men in their gayest suits and ties, all waiting for that lone, stubborn juryman to listen to reason. Then the barbecues and the picnics would start. Finally, the one gave in. Have you reached your verdict? We have, Your Honor. And what is the verdict? Not guilty. Not guilty. By now, I felt I had done my share of the fighting. It wasn't easy going up against the powerful forces of society and the courts as I'd been doing for so many years. After all these conflicts, I felt I needed a rest. And my own personal life. After years of loneliness, first with Jessie and then without her, I met someone. Ruby was a newspaper woman. Good one. She was redheaded and beautiful. And we fell in love. Up to this time, I felt, along with a good many others, that getting married was like going into a restaurant with a friend. You order what you want. When you see what the other fella got, you wish you'd taken that. I've always been a finicky eater. I don't like spinach, and I'm glad I don't, because if I liked it, I'd eat it. And I just hate it. Hate shredded wheat also, and I hate anybody who does. After Ruby and I got married, I felt we could spend the rest of our life in Chicago and not running around the country looking for new fights to fight. But then in 1911, Los Angeles Times building blew up, 20 men were killed, and Samuel Gompers, the head of American Labor, persuaded me that I would go down in history as a traitor to their great cause if, in this hour of their greatest need, I refused to take charge of the McNamara defense. Los Angeles. Known to every working man as the scabbiest town on earth. Los Angeles Times and its publisher, Harrison Gray Otis, ran the town. They fought the unions and always won, always. Otis was a man to reckon with. Big, loud, walrus mustache and goatee, had a military bearing. He looked like Buffalo Bill, General Custer, and a holy terror to work for. There were some who found things about Mr. Otis not to admire. Seemed to remember Hiram Johnson, distinguished United States Senator from San Francisco, was one of these. Here's what he had to say. In the city of San Francisco, we have drunk to the very dregs of infamy. We have had vile officials. We have had rotten newspapers. But we have nothing so vile, nothing so low, nothing so debased, nothing so infamous as Harrison Gray Otis. He sits there in senile dementia, with gangrened heart and rotting brain, grimacing at every reform, chattering impotently at all things that are decent, frothing, fuming, violently gibbering, going down into his grave in snarling infamy. He is one thing that all California sees when they look at anything disgraceful, depraved, corrupt, crooked, and putrescent. That is Harrison Gray Otis. Otis could give as good as God. According to the Times, Union men were nothing but anarchists, assassins, cutthroats, thieves, swine. No Union man had been employed by the Times. This is war, Otis declared, and these were hard and bitter times. Until on the early morning of October 1st, 1911, there was a huge explosion in the alley next to the Times plant. Explosion started a terrible fire in which 20 men, printers, machinists, compositors, were trapped and burned to death. A man named Orty McManagle was arrested on another charge, and to save himself, he told the police that two good friends, James B. and John J. McNamara, brothers and leaders of the Structural Iron Workers Union, had put the bomb in the alley near the plant. Los Angeles sent men dark and night out to Colorado. It was a Haywood case all over again, to kidnap the brothers and rush them back to Los Angeles for trial. History repeats itself. That's one of the things wrong with history. I met my clients in jail. James was 28, lean, had a bright gleam in his eye, touch of the poet. John, 27, air of Irish melancholy. He studied law. I liked them both right from the start. That day, I began the months of preparation necessary for the defense. I went to lengths I had never gone before, tracking down every possible piece of evidence, every witness throughout the country. When I started, there was only one thing I was sure of. Every working man everywhere in America was convinced, absolutely, the McNamaras were innocent. Every union contributed to their defense. We received thousands of letters from workers all over the country wanting to make a small contribution from their savings. But the deeper I got into the case, the more it became unmistakably clear to me that the McNamaras had put the bomb in the alley near the Times plant. Everything Orty McManagle said they had done. And they left a trail behind them a mile wide. And surely the state would hang them. Why? Asked James. Why? We wouldn't say it first. Then he said, we had a labor parade. Cops beat up some of the boys. Next morning, the Times praised those cops for their heroic work. It was more than I could stand. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't bear the thought of their hanging. I didn't know how I could prevent it. I just didn't know what to do. Then it seemed barely possible that despite all the bitterness in Los Angeles, perhaps if the McNamaras admitted everything before trial, perhaps I could persuade the prosecution to allow them to plead guilty and go to jail. I decided to try. After weeks of discussions with prosecution, discussions with the McNamaras, discussions with Harrison Gray Otis, we were finally able to conclude an agreement that saved the boys' lives. Full confession, life in prison for James, and 15 years for John. Negotiations were completed so late the jury lists had already been selected. And still nobody knew what I had done. The morning of the trial, tens of thousands of our friends staged a labor parade. They cheered me all the way to the courthouse. Had to push through a huge crowd to get into the courtroom. And inside the courtroom, workers all over the country wore their badges proudly. McNamara's not guilty. May it please the court. My clients wish to withdraw their plea of not guilty and plead guilty. Inside the crowded courtroom, nobody could believe what they just heard. Then there were people shrieked, people wept. People screamed in anger, men, their fists. There, people who believed with all their hearts in the McNamaras were told without any warning that they were wrong. They felt betrayed. Many felt I had betrayed them. It took a long while for the crowded courtroom to empty. I went out with the rest. It was growing dark. Street lamps were being turned on. McNamara badges lay where they'd been thrown in the gutter. Billy Kavanaugh, a policeman, a friend of mine, came up to me. He was alarmed at people shaking their fists and calling me a traitor. He said, "Take my arm." I said, "I wasn't brave. No, Billy. I'll go down the street with the crowd. I've walked with them when they cheered me. I'll go back the way I came." Two days after the McNamara trial, before I could leave Los Angeles, return to my home, my friends in Chicago, I myself was arrested, indicted on 2 counts of trying to suborn, bribe, fix the McNamara jury. One of my associates had hired Bert Franklin, the detective and former investigator with the Los Angeles District Attorney, to investigate prospective juries for the McNamara trial. Franklin did more than investigate them. He offered 5 of them bribes to bring in a verdict of not guilty. If that was not possible, to hang the jury. No doubt about what Franklin did. He was caught by 5 Burns detectives on the corner of 3rd and Los Angeles streets in broad daylight, offering Lockwood a $500 down payment. I was standing across the street at the time and saw him do it. For weeks, Franklin wouldn't say who he was acting for, if anyone. He did say that I had nothing to do with it or any knowledge that was being done. Then Franklin was put on trial, pleaded guilty, and was let off with a fine. After that, he told the grand jury I had given him the money, told him who to bribe and how much, and so I was indicted. When Judge Hutton called the case of People against Clarence Darrow for trial, my lawyer, Earl Rogers, stood up, as I had so many times, and said, "Ready, Your Honor." Then I guess he had to touch me on the shoulder and say, "Clarence, you're supposed to stand up too. You're the defendant." Of course, I took an active part in my own behalf, especially in the cross-examination of Franklin. "Mr. Franklin, if I was sending you out to bribe a juror, would I give you a check which could be traced back, or would I give you cash? If I wanted prospective jurors bribed, would I send you out, my chief investigator, whose every move was being watched by Burns operatives, or would I have imported a stranger for the dirty work? If I knew you were passing a check there, would I have let myself be seen in the vicinity? Would I have picked one of the busiest corners in Los Angeles? Would I have crossed the street to talk to you when I saw Detective Brown walking right behind you? Or are these things details in a gigantic conspiracy to destroy as many of labor's leaders and supporters as possible? Gentlemen of the jury, I think I can say that no one in my native town would have made any statement as the district attorney made in this court examining his jury. I venture to say he could not thereafter have found a companion in Chicago except among crooks and detectives if he had dared to open his mouth that way. But here I am, in his hands, think of it, in a position where he can call me a coward. In my entire life, I've never seen so cowardly, so sneaky, so brutal an act as District Attorney Ford has committed in this courtroom. In examining you, he asked you whether, if I were to address you, you might be likely to be swayed by sympathy. Well, you won't be if you wait for me to ask it. I've never asked sympathy of anybody. If I won't ask sympathy of you, I'd rather go to the penitentiary than ask for sympathy. What I do ask of you is that you consider Franklin's story. Is it reasonable or is it absurd? Leave out the moral question. Leave out the tradition of a profession I have followed for 35 years. Would I take that chance with all these gumshoe men everywhere, the rise of everybody connected with this case? Detectives in town, all over the town, as thick as lice in Egypt. Gentlemen, don't ever think your life or your liberty is secure, or your family's liberty is safe. Don't ever think that any human being's liberty is safe, when on evidence like this, I, with some influence, some respect, can be brought here and placed in the shadow of the penitentiary. I know my life, I know what I've done. My life has not been perfect. It's been human, too human. I've tried to help in this world. I've not had malice in my heart. I've done the best I could. I ask you to save my liberty and my name. Jury's out 34 minutes before they came back. I thought they wanted instructions from the judge, but Foreman Williams stood up, said he had a verdict, smiled, said not guilty. Ruby was at my side, we hugged and kissed. First person to get to us was Judge Hutton, who ran down from the bench to embrace me. I said I felt like a stranger in Los Angeles. But that wasn't so true after my trial. Many people were very kind to me. One, Senator William Borer from Idaho, who had prosecuted the Haywood case that I defended. In the middle of my trial, somebody came up to him and said, well, since Darrow bribed the McNamara jurors, he probably did the same with Haywood. That's how he won. Borer said, no, Darrow didn't bribe those jurors. He just frightened them to death. I was gladder than to get back to Chicago, even though for a long time Chicago wasn't so glad to have me. That's the way things are sometimes. Charge hangs on after the acquittal. Took some people years before they asked me to represent them again. Some people never forgot. All the clients I had before my trial, corporate, labor, individual, none ever asked me to represent them again. 3 months before I got my first case, a year before I started making a living. My practice was mostly criminal, defending unpopular people, unfortunate souls, murderers, alleged and in fact. Never hesitated to defend a man charged with murder, if only to prevent a second murder by the state. These were hard times for unpopular people. Red baiting, Palmer raids, witch hunts, government newspapers telling people to mob, jail, and kill dissenters, like the 16 Chicago communists guilty of the crime of talk, or the secretary of the Rockford branch of the Communist Labor Party, accused of using the entire resources of his party's treasury, the entire 30 cents, to overthrow the government of the United States. The 11 Italian anarchists in Milwaukee, who may have had the bad taste to call this country a jail and the president a pig. But gentlemen, these are errors of judgment, not transgressions against the legal structure. I shall not argue with you whether my client's ideas are right or wrong. I'm not bound to believe them right. You're to take their side. You're not bound to believe them right, to find them not guilty. But if this jury should make it harder for a man to be a rebel, you will be doing the most you could for the damnation of the human race. We lost most of these political cases in court, lost them again on appeal. But every now and again, one judge would agree with us in dissent. There's only one man who stated the case for freedom. Maybe that's all it takes. One. addition to the law, I did some lecturing and debating along the Chautauqua circuit. After we got back to Chicago, it helped pay the bills those first few years, and eventually I got to enjoy it as much as anything I did. I always took the anti-side in debate. I like the feeling of getting to my feet after my opponent had gotten his ovation, facing a crowd of 500 or 1,000 people, all waiting for me to fall on my face. And then maybe I like the idea of trying to turn some of them around in my way of thinking, or maybe get them to ask themselves a question or two. Should the United States have prohibition? Well, you take out of this world all the people who have drunk down to the past. You take out all the poetry, all the literature, practically every work of genius this world's ever produced. What sort of poem do you think you'd get out of a glass of ice water? Does man have an immortal soul? Once I was debating this, man, I got carried away, told the audience, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Captain of his soul. Hell, he wasn't even deckhand on a raft. Is life worth living? No. Although, I see an attractive woman in the fifth row, maybe that's an argument for the other side. I tell young people who want to start going out into business, I tell them, don't make acquaintances, make friends. Acquaintances are of no value unless you want to go to politics. And I'm sure each of you has a higher ambition than that. When I was a little boy growing up on a farm in Kinsman, Ohio, I was taught as an article of faith that any little boy growing up anywhere in America could someday hope to become the president of this great country and all its people. Now I'm beginning to believe it. I've never been much for organized religion or anything else that tells people what they should believe and what will happen to them if they don't. Fear of God or anything else is not the beginning of wisdom. Better have doubt. Doubt leads to investigation. That's the beginning of wisdom. Still, I'm a lawyer and I'm supposed to check these things out for myself. Ruby and I took a vacation in Palestine to see where it all began. Found an Arab boatman who offered to row us out to the spot where Jesus walked on the water. All he wanted for this was $15. No wonder Jesus walked. The most religious people, the most righteous believers of all are, of course, the fundamentalists who believe that every word in the Bible is literally true, don't want the schools or anyone else teaching anything different. Noah got 2 animals of every species on his ark, including 1 million insects. Joshua made the sun stand still so the day could be lazy. They could finish the battle. Balaam's ass spoke to him, probably in Hebrew. Many asses have spoken, some doubtless in Hebrew, but they have not been that breed of ass. William Jennings Bryan, welcome to Tennessee, sir. You made a considerable study of the Bible, haven't you, Mr. Bryan? You've written and published articles on the Bible almost weekly for 50 years. You believe that everything in the Bible should be interpreted literally? So when you read that the whale swallowed Jonah, you accept that literally. Was that the ordinary runner whale, or was it made specially for that purpose? Oh, I see, it was a miracle. You believe that Joshua made the sun stand still? So you must believe at that time the sun went around the earth. No. It must have been the earth he made stand still. Have you ever pondered what would naturally happen to the earth if it stood suddenly still? Don't you know it would have been converted into a molten mass of matter? Don't you care? You believe the story of the flood? When was the flood? 2,348 BC. Well, that's according to Bishop Ussher's calculations. And you accept it. All right. So you believe that all living things not contained on the ark were destroyed. So that 4,273 years ago, that's taking 1,925 years since the Bible, adding to that the 2,348 years going back to the flood. So 4,273 years ago, there was not a living thing on the earth excepting the people on the ark, the animals on the ark, and the fishes. Any idea who Noah threw the rope to when he docked the ark? When the Bible says the morning and the evening were the first day, does that mean anything to you? Were these 24-hour days? No? Any idea how long they were? You believe God made the sun on the fourth day. So how could you distinguish the evening from the morning of the first 3 days without any sun? The Bible does. Your Bible does. Doesn't that bother you? You say my argument's going in one ear and out the other. I'm not surprised. There's nothing in between to stop it. If today you take a thing like evolution, make it a crime to teach in public schools. Tomorrow you make it a crime to teach in the church. Next session, you might ban books and newspapers. If you do the one, you can do the other. A lot of people were sure that as I got older and closer to my final exams, I'd get religion even after the monkey trial. Never did. Still believe that when I die, there'll be nothing left over. Neither heaven nor hell. Ruby has a slightly different point of view. She believes there is a heaven and a hell. But it won't make any difference to me which one I go to. I'll have so many good friends in both places. I don't look forward to death. Because I don't like to leave those I love, especially now that I have grandchildren. I guess I've lived so long I formed the habit. But neither do I fear death, which at least brings rest and peace. I found that nobody wants another life. We all just want to go on living, which is quite a different matter. Maybe someday we'll even be willing to let the other fellow live. A committee came to me from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, asking me to defend 11 Negroes in Detroit charged with murder. Told them I was tired after 48 years in the law, not mentally or physically fit. I knew I would take the case, even when I was making the excuses. I knew after they told me about Dr. Rossi and Sweet. In the early days, Detroit and all other northern cities were friendly to Negroes. But that was a long time ago. Now you all know about the Chicago riots, which began when a colored boy was swept up onto a white bathing beach and raft, and men and boys of my race stoned him to death. Washington, St. Louis, Detroit. I'm not blaming Detroit. I'm just saying what happened here. Dr. Sweet bought a house, a nice house, on the corner of Charlevoix and Garland Streets, all white section. When the neighborhood learned he was Negro, they banded together into a neighborhood improvement association, made threats. Dr. Sweet asked the police for protection, which they provided. He then moved his wife and his goods into his house, took his 2 brothers and some friends with him. He also took a number of rifles and a valise full of cartridges. First night, a crowd gathered, made some noise, that was all. People in the house didn't sleep all night, stood by the window, watching out. Second night, the crowd grew bigger, more boisterous. There were about 8 or 10 policemen in the area, but they were mainly ornamental. Around 11 o'clock, Dr. Sweet's brother drove up to the house. As the men in the house were standing by the windows with their guns, Dr. Sweet's brother tried to make his way to the house. The mob attacked him, rushed the house, throw rocks as they came. Shots came from the house into the street where a white man, Leo Briner, was killed. All 11 people in the house were arrested on the spot, charged with murder in the first degree. I went to the jail to meet my client. He was a young man, quiet, attractive. Told me about that night. About the mob rushing the house, shouting, "Get them, get them, get them!" Like a human sea is the way Dr. Sweet described it, hurling rocks as they came. When I opened the door to let my brother in and saw the mob, he said, I realized I was facing the same mob that had hounded my people through its entire history. In my mind, I knew what I was up against. I knew what mobs had done to my people before. The legal problem was to show that people outside the house constituted a mob that endangered the Swedes' lives. District attorney said there are too few of them to represent any danger. Called so many eyewitnesses to testify there hadn't been a mob. The witnesses themselves were a mob. But the real problem was to show this was not a case of murder, but a case of race prejudice. My friend, the district attorney, says, gentlemen, this is not a case of prejudice. This is a case of murder. Race and color have nothing to do with this case. I insist there is nothing but prejudice in this case. If it had been reversed, if 11 whites had shot and killed a black while defending their home against a mob of black, nobody would dream of having them indicted. I know what I'm talking about, and so do you. They would have given medals instead. You need not tell me you are not prejudiced. I know better. We're nothing but a bundle of prejudices anyhow. Prejudice against other people's color, prejudice against other people's religion, prejudice against other people's politics, prejudice against other people's looks, prejudice about the way they dress. We're full of prejudice. My only hope, gentlemen, is this, that you are strong enough and honest enough and decent enough to lay it aside and decide this case as you ought to. I have watched day after day these black, tense faces who are now looking at you 12 whites, the hopes and fears of a race in your keeping. Their eyes are fixed on you. Their hearts go out to you. Their hopes hang on your verdict. Jury deliberated over 40 hours, finally reporting that they couldn't agree. Judge had to declare mistrial. Tried the case a second time. This time we won. Every few days I get a letter from some friend asking why I don't see me anymore. They've done something to offend me. I say, no, I'm always happy to see my friends. I'm just letting go of things in general. I'll see you tomorrow. But the next day, the easy chair lures me to its depths. By and by, I look out the window, over the trees, path leading me down past the velvety green grass, down the lake. So beautiful and blue. I don't feel like going out today. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll see my friends, perhaps. I feel better about my work if I could see some advance had been made in the law since I was admitted to practice over 50 years ago. science and mathematics, the world has been made over new. Even religion is a broader and more modified approach. The entire material world has been made over. But the law, administration, have stood frozen, adamant, defying every time, eternity, change. You wonder what the compensations are. For me, there's been one that's made it all worthwhile. 102 men I've defended have faced the death penalty. Not one has been hanged, and none ever will. They never dare take another chance. Unless I knew there was no other way. Why did they kill him? Not for money, not for hate, not for spite. They killed little Bobby Franks as they might kill a spider or a fly for the experience. They killed them because they were made that way. Because somewhere in the infinite processes that go to the making up of the boy or the man, something slipped. And these unfortunate lads sit here, hated, despised, outcast, with the community shrieking for their blood. Your Honor, when the public is concerned and demands a punishment, no matter what the crime, the one punishment they think of is death. None of us are mindful of the public, Your Honor. I have stood here for 3 months, as one might stand at the ocean, trying to sweep back the tide. I hope the seas are subsiding and the wind is falling. I believe they are. But I wish to make no false pretense to this court. The easy thing to do, the popular thing to do, is to hang Dickie Loeb and Babe Leopold. Men and women who do not think will applaud. The cruel, heartless will approve. But more and more fathers and mothers who are gaining an understanding and asking questions, not just about these poor boys, but about their own. They would join in no claim of the death of my clients. They would ask that the shedding of blood be stopped. Your Honor stands between the future and the past. I know the future is with me and what I stand for here. I'm pleading for a time when hatred and cruelty will not control the hearts of men, when we can learn by reason, judgment, and understanding that all life is worth saving, and that mercy is the highest attribute of man. I feel I should apologize for the length of time I've taken. This case may not be as important as I think it is. If I should succeed in saving these boys' lives, but do nothing for the progress of the law, I should feel sad indeed. If I can succeed, my greatest reward, my greatest hope, be that I've done something to help human understanding, to temper justice with mercy, to overcome hate with love. I was reading last night of the aspirations of the old Persian poet Omar Khayyam. It appealed to me. It's the highest I can envision. I wish it were in my heart. I wish it were in the hearts of all. So I be written a book of love. I do not care about that book above. Erase my name or write it as you wish. So I be written